Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency. Auto, home, flood, business, 504-556-0809. Dave Miette, INSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, tire siping, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
C&C Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, C&C provides patient-centered care for your entire family. C&C Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I am your host, Eric Asher. We're live from our Pontree Production Studios in Mid-City. Maybe on what would we call this now? Gert Town? I'm not sure what part of town we are in. We're just in the shadows of the old Times-Picayune building. And of course, also, again, we have two former Times-Picayune reporters with us today on the program. We'll cover Saints, LSU, Tulane Pelicans. If we have time, we want to talk about the retrofitting of Zephyr Field, the Shrine on Airline. We mentioned it last week, again, about where would the USFL play if they came back to New Orleans. We'll get into that discussion as well. And two of the best we have in all the state. Les East of CrestCitySports.com and Saturday Down South is with us, also an accomplished author. Jim Derry of NOLA.com has a great podcast there as well. Both guys join us on the program now. Guys, welcome to the show. And as always, we appreciate your time. Before we get started, Les, tell us about the fantastic book and about everything you're doing in terms of your writing.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, the book is called Donkeys, Elephants, and Giraffes. It is a political novel. It also has some sports elements to it. And you can find it online at all the major platforms, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, or just Google the title, Donkeys, Elephants, and Giraffes, and it'll pop up. Staying busy with Crescent City Sports and Saturday Down South, as you mentioned, and I'll get a plug tonight, Thursday night, 6 o'clock, the second year of the Crescent City Prep Sports League championship game tonight over at John Ryan Stadium, and it will be the John Curtis team and the Lutcher team playing for the second championship.
That's a great deal.
And it'll be streaming live at CrescentCitySports.com. Right. Almost left out the most important part.
There you go. Jim, welcome back to the show. It's been a while. Thank you for coming down. We certainly appreciate it. Before we get started with the program, tell us all about what you're doing at NOLA.com. I see you on the Final Bet all the time. Tell us all about it.
Well, you know, you talk about next door and the old Times-Picayune. I think Les and I spent a few decades over there. Yeah. Well, I think we missed the place a little bit. But yeah, I work for Times-Picayune, the Advocate, and bet.nola.com. I'm the sports betting writer there. And we are about to get into all of our football previews and putting together, you know, how many wins we think each team's going to have. I have a podcast called Datitude that I do through the show, through the paper. Yep. And we're about to get into, like I said, it's football preview time. I'm on a little mini vacation right now, but I took some time out to come spend with you. And then I also do high school play-by-play we'll start back up in the fall. Be my 5th season with Varsity Sports now as a play-by-play guy. My color commentary guy, Jim Rapier, also spent a few decades over next door. So a lot of times Picayune around, or at least some of, old
and rightly
times
so. A lot of great talent that was there. Incredible talent.
We miss the old days. I think we both can say that we miss the old days.
Absolutely. There were some great times over there, and always get a little sentimental driving here, even though there's not really anything marking the location.
Not anymore. But we'll see. Maybe they'll get the golf deal that's going to be working over there. It's like the third company that's going to put some type of golf situation over there. That's Eric Ritchie's.
It is.
Right. Varsity Sports.
Eric Ritchie
the great Eric Ritchie.
Eric Ritchie brought me in the first full season. Like I said, I think this is our 5th full season coming up. So you do the math. But Eric brought me in. He's been great. And Ben Boylon also owns a piece of the company, and it's been a great company to work for. I enjoy it every school year. It's a little weird in the summer when I don't have anything to call, but we'll get back to it soon enough.
Eric's a great guy, and an outstanding broadcaster as well. All right, let's jump into it. We'll talk Pelicans first. It is free agency. On Friday will be the first day that players can ink a contract with their new teams. The Pelicans have not done much thus far. They have signed Cody Zeller to a 1-year, $3.1 million deal. He is a former center for the Miami Heat, not exactly the athletic big that we thought they were looking for. But Jackson Hayes is now a Laker. Again, they decided not to pick his $8 million option up. Hernan Gomez is either headed to Europe or to another NBA team. They didn't pick up his option. There's a lot of talk that Kyra Lewis is on the trading block. Also, again, Jordan Hawkins signed his rookie deal, and Herb Jones got an extension, 4 years, $54 million. The Pels right now, after releasing, I'm trying to think, Garrett Temple, thank you. Garrett Temple, they saved $5.4 million on his salary, but the Pels are now about $1 million over the luxury tax threshold, and we'll have to be able to do something to be able to counteract that. There are a lot of rumors out there right now that the Pelicans have an interest, or at least have spoken to Portland about Damian Lillard. There are also a lot of rumors out there about Jarrett Allen with the Cleveland Cavaliers, that he may be on the move, and the Pels have an interest there. Nothing concrete there except for, again, the rumor mill. And, of course, the Summer League starts tomorrow for the Pelicans, where, again, we'll have a chance to be able to see some of the backups, some of the former first round and second round picks compete in Las Vegas with a 5-game set there. With that said, David Griffin, with all the tumultuous offseason so far between Zion's situation, obviously all the talk about possibly moving up to get Scoot Henderson, then of course the talk about maybe possibly moving off of Valanciunas. Then last week Griffin comes out and says they want to build around Valanciunas. A whole lot of smoke, but not a lot of fire going on to the Pels right now.
Yeah, and not a lot of this is surprising. I think their own free agents played out exactly as we expected. We expected Hayes to leave. We expected Hernan Gomez to look for a better opportunity. We expected them to pick up Najee Marshall's option and then to get Herb Jones under a long-term deal, let Josh Richardson go.
Right.
And then releasing Garrett Temple was not a surprise. So nothing surprising there, but nonetheless, it doesn't really excite the fan base when there isn't something unexpected that they can get optimistic about. But the one thing, and something's going to happen. It may not be major, but something's going to happen because they want to get under the luxury tax, and I'm sure they will. The one thing, there are two elements here I want to touch on. One is that they don't have to do a whole lot, because if they can just keep their two best players healthy and get 60 to 70 games out of them, that's going to improve them dramatically, more so than some teams that are going out and spending money on newcomers. But the other thing is, David Griffin said in the exit interview at the end of the season, is one of the things that happened last season is they realized they were not that well prepared to play long periods of time without their two best players. The rest of the roster wasn't shaped the way it needed to be to withstand those absences better than they did. And that's something they had to look at in the offseason. Well, they haven't done anything to address that. Cody Zeller is probably closer to Willie Hernan Gomez than he is to Jackson Hayes, but that's just filling in a blank on the roster. That's not an upgrade. So they have not done what Griffin said they needed to do, which was be better prepared to handle those absences if they happen again. But it's early in the process. Something's going to happen. I think probably a trade of some sort is likely to happen. Kyra Lewis is a natural candidate for that. So we'll see what happens. But I wouldn't expect it to be a real blockbuster offseason for the Pelicans. And it doesn't need to be if they can just keep their guys healthy.
Jim?
You know, kind of to expand on what Les was saying, I just think with the money situation that they're in, it's really hard to do anything. And, you know, it's
unless you want to go over the tax, right?
Well, yeah, but this isn't the kind of team in this market that's going to go over the tax, or at least not be far over it. I think $1 million is fine, so maybe they don't make any more moves. I do think there'll be some sort of trade. We've been hearing about Carol Lewis being traded for what, you know, almost a year now. There's been, and I looked at one point, you know, he went from not playing to like 4 or 5 games in a row. He played a bunch before the trade deadline. I think they were showcasing. I just guess they couldn't get anything to go out there. But this team is, I think, like Les said, if they can keep the big two healthy, if they can keep Ingram healthy, if they can keep Zion healthy, which is like keeping Michael Thomas healthy at this point, you know, they will be in a position to where I think they can be, you know, that middle tier playoff type team, like a 4 or 5 seed type of team. And then who knows what happens. We saw what Miami did as an 8 seed this year. Anybody can make a run. I think for, you know, the tide has turned to where the East is now, I think, stronger than the West, which is weird to even say. But I think that's where we are. And I think the Pelicans can be competitive. I don't expect them to make a lot of moves this offseason. I really don't. And I think, you know, you talk about the word smoke and no fire. I think that's exactly what this is, and I think it's going to be that way.
Guys, two points. First of all, again, and look, Mrs. Benson can do whatever she wants with her money. It's her money, right? At this point. She has pledged her money when she passes to the City of New Orleans charities and charitable organizations around the South Louisiana, and Southern Mississippi. Most teams are trying to make a profit. The Pelicans are one of 2 teams that have never went over the luxury tax threshold. We've been hearing that if we're close, we're going to go over. Well, you've got the nucleus of a team that most people think, if they're healthy, could be a top 4 team in the West. I maybe hesitate on that because I think the West has gotten stronger. Okay, so maybe again they haven't kept up with the Joneses, so to speak. I mean, remember the Lakers last year were an afterthought, but by the trading deadline they totally revamped their roster. Now they're willing to go over the luxury tax threshold because of, again, the market size, etc. If you're not going to do it now, when? If you're not going to augment that roster with maybe another star, and I'm talking about, again, basically what Griffin said, what I've said, what you said, what we've all talked about, that, again, you can't count on Ingram and Zion not to miss at least between 20 and 40 games a season, respectively. So you have to have another player that can carry your team, and C.J. McCollum's not the guy. So why not, again, get into a situation where, again, maybe you're going to, for the first time ever, you're going to jump over that luxury tax threshold, bring in a top player, and make that run, especially while you have these 2. Because, again, if it doesn't work out this year, in my opinion, for those 2, if they don't stay healthy, you're blowing it up anyway next year.
Well, you know, I think that's the key, is next year. I don't think they're of the mind to go deep into the luxury tax at this point. Like Jim said, where they are now is tolerable. But in order to bring in another guy who can carry the team, Damian Lillard, for example, that's going to put them well over the tax. I don't think they're prepared to do that. I think they want to give this another year to see if they can get Williamson and Ingram healthy. And they don't have to be healthy for 82 games. Most guys don't play 82. If you can get 60 to 65 out of both of them, that's good enough. You know, Larry Nance said at the end of the season, when we're healthy, that's the #1 seed in the West. Well, that's overstating the case, but probably a top 4 seed that would have home court in the first round. So I think that they've made the calculation that they're going to tweak the roster at this point, manage their finances, and hope they get better luck with health next year. And then if they don't perform well next year or the injuries persist next year, then they have to take a look at it. But I still think ultimately if they go out and get another high-priced player, it's going to be a trade that involves one of the 2 on the roster. I don't think they're going to pay 3 all-star type players.
And I would throw C.J. McCollum in an impossible trade as well. When you look at all 3 players making between 33 and 35, that's Zion, Brandon Ingram, and C.J. McCollum respectively.
Yeah, I just look realistically. In answer to your question, I don't think they're ever going to be the team that goes well over a luxury tax. It just isn't the market for that. I mean, you have to be realistic about who you are, and you have to be a little lucky. And if you look at what Denver did, you know, for the most part, they stayed pretty healthy. You know, Jokic got hurt towards the end of the season, and when he was out, you saw the Pelicans beat him, and I think they lost 3 games in a row. And you know, they had a kind of a slow finish. He came back healthy, and they were fine.
Yes.
So. Well, more than fine, they won the championship. But you know, the Pelicans are in a similar boat with a lot of other teams that want to be good. Did we really think the Nuggets were going to win the championship going into the season? No. But nobody knew how good Jamal Murray would be either. So I think that the Pelicans, if Brandon Ingram can play, I think he needs to play 65 or 70 games. Zion needs to play 60. If that can happen, this can be a team that can win with what they have now. I really believe that.
And Jim, I'll take you. I'm of the opinion that we really don't know, okay? I mean, look, teams really start to really buckle down, especially the good teams, in the second half of the season. Pels were playing really well early.
Right.
They got to January. The bottom fell out with the injuries. So do we really know how good this team can be when the rubber hits the road and you're really in a playoff push?
Well, you say the bottom fell out with the injuries. The bottom fell out with 1 injury.
Right.
I mean, as soon as Zion was gone, this team, and they went through a transition period, and then they kind of figured out, as they did the year before, but not quite as quickly.
Right.
They figured out how to win without him, but they were so dead set on that, you know, they were sure they were going to have Zion the whole year last year. And you know, it happened earlier the season before. They had more time to correct themselves and get better, get past that 3-20 stretch or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was a different year last year because it happened later.
I think another thing that has to be taken into account is this is still a really young team, except for McCollum and Valanciunas. Zion turns 23, I think it might be today.
Yeah.
If it is, and you're watching, happy birthday, Zion.
Happy birthday, Zion. No cake for you.
No cake. So he's 23. Ingram's still only like 25 or 26. They have some promising draft choices. Dyson Daniels. They have a new #1 pick. Alvarado is the reason that Kyra Lewis is being shopped.
Right.
So they have a lot of young talent on this team. They should be an ascending team as long as they can keep these guys healthy.
Right.
So the ceiling is still. We don't know how high it is, but they've already shown when they're healthy, it's pretty high. And with these guys maturing, presumably, the ceiling is going to go even higher. So that's something I have to take into account is don't panic, because this roster, they can get a lot better internally by keeping young players healthy and developing them.
Some people believe that they are one of the few teams in the NBA right now that have the assets to go out and make a splash. Whether, again, it is one of their stars, one of their 3 stars, okay? The 8 first-round picks that they have, the 4 pick swaps that they have, and that, again, when you are that close, you need to go ahead and make that move because they have the assets.
You look, I just don't think it's going to happen. You look at what they've done in the offseason, and you know, they lose, they change their trainers and their medical staff. That's all that's all about Zion. You know, they fire who a lot of people think was a great assistant coach in Teresa Witherspoon, and that's because of Zion. So everything they're doing right now is because of Zion. They are trying to show him that you can't be this 19-year-old kid anymore. You have to be this 23-year-old adult and a man now. And I think we're going to find out if it makes a difference. But as far as making a splash, I just don't think this is the kind of team that's going to make the splash that fans want them to make. They're going to have to win with what they have, and I think they can. But it all goes back to what we've been talking about. And if they, I hate to say if, stay healthy, but people don't want to believe just because of what they've seen. Look, we just don't know.
Right.
We don't know how these changes are going to affect Zion, and I think we're going to find out soon.
Yeah. I don't think it's a surprise that they have been guarded and maybe moving methodically when it comes to free agency. I mean, that is kind of their MO, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, as we said before, they have a lot of pieces in place that they haven't been able to utilize as much as they would like. Williamson, Ingram, McCollum, 10 games together last year? Give them 60 games or so together next year and see what a difference that makes. And getting back to what Jim said about the changes they've made in the organization in the offseason to try and light a fire and get Zion's attention. That gets back to the time frame I'm talking about. Is I think they've reached a point where it's like, okay, Zion, you have to do everything possible to keep yourself healthy and in shape and ready to lead this team on a championship run. And next season, we need to see significant progress in that direction. And if we don't, then we start to have some of these other conversations in earnest. And that's why I think they are being methodical and being patient, because we don't know exactly how high the ceiling can be if they can put everybody together for a whole season. And they want to see that, and they're hoping it'll happen this year. And if it doesn't, then I think the approach might change a year from now.
Zion is said to be in the facility working out. He's been there. He's been here in New Orleans, which is again something that hasn't happened in a while. It really comes down to, again, this team maturing. We're hearing it. We heard a lot of stuff now in the off season about not paying attention to details, not doing what's necessary to be ready for the next game. I've talked about going to the clubs instead of in the cold tub, right? C.J. McCollum kind of laid it out there. Larry Nance laid it out there after the season about the lack of maturity on this team. And that also goes from not just Zion. Brandon's got to be able to play through injury. The young players that are coming in now, they see these other guys getting away with it. So it's like a kid in a family, right? They're going to try as well. What has to happen for this team outside of injury to be able to mature? It seems like Larry Nance and C.J. McCollum should be enough, along with a Garrett Temple, to be able to show these guys how to mature off the court, but it doesn't seem to have resonated as of yet.
Well, Eric, you talk about the players. You got to remember, you got a coach in Willie Green that's only, 41, 42 years old and is about to go in his third year. I think that first year was such a whirlwind, from being so bad to just getting on fire and saying all the right things and seeing, all these great speeches that he came up with during the playoffs to light a fire on them. I think your sophomore year, you tend to have a slump anyway, right? Okay. I want to see how he matures. I think he's.
Is that why they brought Borrego in?
I think it is. I think it is, and I think Willie Green can be an excellent coach. Just what I saw that first year, I was really excited about where it can be.
Too.
But you kind of take things for granted. Okay, Zion's playing this for a whole first half of the season. It was a little bit different for him. He figured out how to do it without him, and he just assumed he was going to have him all year. It was a little bit harder to get adjusted in February and March, and then they got a little bit better again towards the end of the season. So I'm really interested to see the maturity of Willie Green going into a third season. Whether or not these guys stay healthy or not, he's going to have to find a way to do it. Every day is going to be different because you don't know what you're going to have.
Piggyback on that, if you would.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. This is a young coaching staff, and so Willie Green and his staff, they're growing too, just like the players that they're coaching, and they're learning along the way. Willie Green never been a head coach until he came here 2 years ago, and he's had to deal with so much different stuff, and that's why they did bring in James Borrego to improve their defense, but also a more experienced coach, a guy who's been a head coach, a guy who's been a lead assistant a lot. And I think we expected when the season ended that someone, a more seasoned coach with head coaching experience, would be brought in as a consigliere to Willie Green. And James Borrego is the guy. He's familiar with the organization. He's been around the NBA, and I think he was a very good choice in that regard. So, I think people need to be patient.
Okay.
And you can't be patient forever, and you know, or that windows are going to close sometime down the road. But at the same time, there's a lot of talent on the court, there's a lot of talent on the coaching staff, and it's all trying to grow together. And if they can put it all together for an extended period of time, I think we need to see what it produces, because it could be something really good.
One little thing
last
there,
word.
as a bias, as a girl dad, I was a little disappointed they let Teresa Witherspoon.
Right.
I mean, and I'm not. I really think she has a chance to be, dare I say, a head coach in this league. I really
in the
believe
NBA.
that. Yes,
Okay.
I really believe that she does.
Okay.
I think she has the stuff. So I was, and again, I know this is all about Zion and
It is.
around what's going on with him, and he was closest to her. But I was a little disappointed that they let her go.
I'm a little surprised she had a chance to be, I think it was Phoenix Mercury last year, to be the head coach there, and turned it down to stay here.
Because I think this is what she wants to do.
Right.
I think she sees a path to where she can.
She will be an NBA head coach.
I think she
Be
can.
interested to see where she lands. And I was shocked when they let her go because of her relationship with Zion. But maybe it was about, look, you know what? We need to toughen him up some, and we had heard that he would, that was kind of his sounding board.
Well, he needs a dose of reality.
Right.
This isn't his ship.
I agree.
He can't go around and do what he wants.
Well, not just that. I mean, again, he's in the beginning of his max deal. There are weight clauses in this, and at this point, the organization's got to be fed up. You got to be fed up with all the things that are going on. Again, with the social media circus that was going on with his personal life. Again, not staying in shape once he's injured.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things that, again, that you're counting on him to be one of your top players. He's got to be available.
Yep.
Well, absolutely. That's the most important thing, and I do think a lot of this has to do with his maturity level, and as you alluded
And
to,
focus on basketball, right?
Yeah, and C.J. McCollum, made it clear at the end of the season that there's a lot that goes into being a professional basketball player, and some of the most important players on this team are a little behind schedule in figuring that out.
But CJ needs to be around. You talk about a potential of trading him. I think he needs to be here because of his veteran leadership, and he is the strongest quiet man behind the scenes that you're going to see. And
and him and Nance again are those two guys that are trying to be able to, pass their wisdom on to these young guys. So we'll see how it plays out. It doesn't seem like they were listening much over the last year, though, and that to me is a red flag. I've said you got to bring in dogs with rings, right? This team needs to be toughened up some on the court and off the court. I'd like to see a guy that can come in, or a couple guys that can come in that maybe have won a championship, that also have the ability to be able to demand, again, maturity from some of these young guys that are on the team.
Yeah, that's all good, and I'm sure the organization's working overtime to figure out how they can get through to these guys and do all that. But ultimately, it's the player.
Personal responsibility?
Personal responsibility. Those guys are going to commit themselves to being champions and doing everything that's required of a champion, or it's not going to work. Nobody can make it work for them. Ultimately, it lies at the feet of the two most important players on this team.
It's also about the issue of, again, continuing to, draft 19-year-olds, right? Yeah. I mean, again, the biggest issue we have right now, and I know the NBA's got their G League, is if this was like minor league baseball or Major League Baseball, where, again, you get drafted out of high school, but you can't get touched until your junior year. College basketball would be better. NBA basketball would be better all the way down the line. Obviously, that's never going to happen. We're down this road now. But a lot of guys, the coaches that have these young players, they become babysitters. They're trying to teach these guys how to be pros. And that's why, again, like a guy like Jackson Hayes, I think he's going to have a better career with the Los Angeles Lakers than he had here in New Orleans. He's got the talent. Playing with LeBron, maybe a guy like LeBron can instill something in him. It's either that or you're not going to be in the league. It's one or the other.
I think it's the latter.
You think he's not going to be in the league?
I just don't.
Okay.
I mean, I don't. Look, I agree with you that he's got talent, but I don't. Certainly not a loss for the Pelicans. He wasn't playing, and good luck if LeBron can change him and fix him and make him the player that he has potential to be. But I don't.
And I do think the Pelicans have tried to put together a cross section. Okay, they've had, Ingram came in with the Lakers as a youngster. Zion came here as a teenager. They traded for C.J. McCollum. They traded for Jonas Valanciunas. Larry Nance is an important part. Garrett Temple was important in that regard while he was here. And so they've tried to surround the young guys with role model veterans.
Right.
And we saw examples last year. Larry Nance could not have called out Brandon Ingram any more than when he said, if I'm not 100%, I'm going to give my team what I do have.
Right.
He went out and played on a very, very bad ankle while Brandon Ingram sat on the bench, and Ingram played the game after that. So, and CJ's comments at the end of the year. So, you know, they've put together a group that should be able to have an impact on these guys, and those guys have made an effort to get through to these guys. Now they have to put it into practice.
What's the old adage? You can bring a horse to water, just can't make him drink. There you go.
You can make them eat, though.
Yes, you can. A lot of hay will be there. There you go. All right. Spoken like a guy that's been to the fairgrounds once or twice. There you go. All right. And not for Jazz Fest, that's by the way. All right. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Les East, Jim Derry is with us. We'll take a quick break here from our underwriters. When we come back, we'll jump into Saints, LSU, Tulane. Also, again, hope to get to the Zephyr renovation. All that coming up here on Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Stay tuned.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by
At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency. Auto, home, flood, business, 504-556-0809. Dave Miette, INSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, tire siping, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
C&C Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, C&C provides patient-centered care for your entire family. C&C Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Les East, Jim Derry is with us today on the program. Guys, we'll talk Saints now. Minicamp is over. We've got now the little hiatus between now and training camp at the end of July. Les, how do you think they did this offseason in terms of filling holes on the team and also, again, giving Dennis Allen what he felt he needed on his coaching staff?
I'm glad you asked that, Eric, because I've started my Countdown to Saints Training Camp series, annual event at CrescentCitySports.com. Wrote about Derek Carr first, wrote about the revamped coaching staff this week, and next week will be about free agency and the personnel acquisitions, and then we'll have a couple of more before they report in earnest on the 26th. But plug aside, I think they did a good job. I mean, this whole thing is Derek Carr. Okay, you take Derek Carr out of the offseason, you say, well, gee, that's just spinning their wheels. What are they doing? But that position is so important, and the upgrade is potentially so significant that elevates the offseason significantly. Now, the changes on the coaching staff, which I go into in the story this week, Some were Allen's choices, and some weren't. Right? You know, Ryan Nielsen went for a promotion in Atlanta,
Great point.
but they got rid of Dan Rauscher, who wound up at Tulane. And they got rid of Chris Richard, who I guess can go back to being Chris Richard now that he's not in New Orleans. And so, you know, it wasn't all by design. And it's interesting because the defense was so much better than the offense last year, but most of the changes are on the defensive side of the coaching staff. But nonetheless, I just think Derek Carr is so important to what they did in the offseason that everything else kind of trickles down from there. I do think, you know, this is still Dennis Allen's defense. He's still the guy running it. He's still the guy calling the plays. They did keep Michael Hodges, the only position coach they kept on defense, who I think is a rising star in the NFL. So I think Allen is going to be more comfortable with this coaching staff after the changes they've made, and I think you're going to see Pete Carmichael and Ronald Curry feel more comfortable coordinating and calling the offense because of the trust factor they're going to have in the quarterback position. So, and they still have some money set aside for some concerns that might arise during training camp and the preseason. So I would give them a good grade for the offseason, both in terms of coaching and player acquisition, but it almost all revolves around Derek Carr.
That money set aside is about $14 million. The Saints have never had $14 million at this point in the offseason to spend. Some of that money is probably going to roll into next year. But Jim, your thoughts?
Well, I give Derek Carr an A. I mean, you've been waiting since Drew Brees left to have a real quarterback.
Right.
We thought it was going to be Jameis, or at least I did.
I did too.
And, you know, I still think Jameis can be a starter in this league. He's kind of just had everything that could go wrong to him, kind of has. But to have him as a backup, which I think is the best backup in the league, the Saints are set up there. What I wish they would have done, I know, you know, everyone was talking about how they needed to shore up the defensive line, and they did. And, you know, they brought in Isaiah Foskey in the second round, and that's great. But I just wish they would have addressed some of the offensive needs that I thought they had a little bit more. Well, first of all, I'm so worried about what's going to happen with Alvin Kamara. I mean, we still haven't heard anything about this and what his suspension is going to be, how long this is going to linger, what kind of shape he's going to be in. I'm just not certain. And look, Kendra Miller is going to be, I think he's going to be a fine back.
How about Williams?
Jamal Williams is going to be a fine starter, and but we haven't seen his full potential. His play in Detroit, he can score touchdowns. Can he carry the load of being a number one back? We're going to find out real soon. I'm just so worried about what's going to happen with Kamara. But then even beyond that, I mean, if Mike Thomas isn't healthy, and we don't know the answer. I mean, we think he's going to be healthy. He says he's
we thought he was going to be healthy last year, though.
Exactly. But if he's not, I just think you're so thin there. And
I agree.
I like what they've done at tight end, and I think Foster Moreau brings a lot to this team, and Jawan Johnson gets the extension or the new contract. I'm just, and along the offensive front, I'm more worried about the offensive front than I am the defensive front. And so they are very thin along that offensive line. And you put an injury in there, a key injury, and they're in big trouble. And then, you know, we haven't seen Trevor Penning play, really. So, I mean, there's just, to me, I don't think they addressed enough of their needs on the offensive side of the ball. But it's kind of like when Sean Payton was coach. It tilted towards the offense, right? And we made sure that Drew Brees had everything he needed or wanted. And now Dennis Allen's it's kind of leaning the other way. I mean, you're talking about a team that has a potential to be a top 5 defense. I really believe that. But as good as I think Derek Carr can be, and I think he can be a top 10 quarterback, I'm not sure this offense can be a top 12 or 15 offense. And it needs to be the type of team that can play into January.
In your opinion, Shepard and Saunders, are they an upgrade over Davenport and Onyemata, Tuttle? And let's throw Davenport in there as well.
I don't think they're an upgrade. I think they're kind of status quo along that defensive front. You know, and we never even talked about Cam Jordan. I mean, what is this, 14th season last? I mean,
I think it's 14.
I mean, so, I mean, how much longer can he go? And I mean, he's such a key part of that defensive front. There are a lot of question marks with this team, kind of like the Pelicans in a lot of ways. But look, this team is in such a good position because their division is so bad that, you know, And they all have an easy schedule. I still think it's going to take 10 wins to win this division, because I think Carolina's going to be a lot better. I think even Atlanta's going to be better. But this team is in a great position to where who's the best quarterback you're going to play all year long? Is it Trevor Lawrence?
Right.
Is Bryce Young going to be good?
Right.
I mean, we don't know the answer to that. So, you see Ryan Tannehill in week 1. They need to find consistency. Derek Carr can give them that, but they're going to need to play a lot of 20 to 17 games, 23 to 16 kind of games. They're not going to be able to win 30 to 27 games. So we'll see if that happens or not.
I'm kind of with Jim. I'm surprised they didn't go and try to upgrade the wide receiver position more. Okay, they brought in a couple of journeymen, Washington and Edwards. Can they somehow again be, if Thomas goes out, can they be the guys that can step in there? I'm surprised with $14 million they haven't gone out and addressed a quality pass rushing defensive end. Those are two questions, and maybe they're waiting to see what's going to happen in training camp before they go pull that trigger there. But those are two areas that I thought they needed to upgrade more, but they didn't do it. Now, Grandison came on. Obviously they got their first-round pick, on their second-round pick in Foskey coming in there. Braziz is going to help, obviously, on the inside. At least you hope he will. But there are some places where maybe, again, a veteran or two, just a mercenary type guy coming in that could really help them at certain positions. And two of those are defensive end and also wide receiver. But I'm with you, Jim. That offensive line, it's shaky at best right now.
Well, I think Jim hit on the three big things on offense. One is the expected absence of Kamara. How long is it going to be? I do think they did a nice job bringing in a draft choice and a veteran to mitigate that loss, but that they're not going to be the same while Kamara's gone, assuming he is. Mike Thomas's health is obviously a question mark, and then they always seem to have significant injuries on the offensive line, and that depth will get exposed if that happens again. But with wide receiver, I do think they're hopeful that Mike Thomas is going to be available. And if he is, with Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, who they are very high on, and with Taysom Hill being in the mix as wide receiver, quarterback, running back, tight end, they have a lot of weapons on offense. So I'm not as concerned about the wide receiver position if they're able to get a good year out of Mike Thomas. I don't think he's going to catch 149 passes again if he is healthy. But I think there's a lot of potential at wide receiver. Now on the defensive side of the ball, the two tackles they brought in, I agree that's sort of a lateral move, but I do think those guys are better run defenders than the guy they lost, and that's what they need to upgrade. They were like 24th against the run last year after being so good for so many years.
Malcolm Brown left, it just kind of...
Yeah, so I think that helps them on the interior, and Grandison I think is underappreciated. Cam Jordan, I believe it's actually his 12th year. Okay. But nonetheless, he's getting up there in years, but he's still playing at a very high level. But I think a guy we haven't talked about who's extremely important, one of the most important players on the team, is Peyton Turner. If he's another Marcus Davenport and doesn't blossom, although Davenport did have one good year, if he doesn't stay healthy and blossom, then that cuts into their depth at defensive end. If he breaks out and is an impact player at defensive end, that elevates the defensive line significantly.
Linebacker's a question mark, too, because of the lack of depth, right?
It is, and you lose Ellis, who was, I thought, blossoming into a really good player. Pete Werner is going to stay healthy. Look, to piggyback on what Les said, you talk about run defense and what they're going to have. Although this division isn't very good when it comes to running the football, you think about who you're playing right off the bat. Derrick Henry in week 1, and in week 2 you got Aaron Jones coming in. I mean, you're talking about two teams that really can run the football right off the bat. You're going to find out early whether you can stop the run or not. And linebacker is a key. I think they are thin there, to be honest.
Me too.
I like what they have in the defensive front. I think they'll be okay there. After all the shoring up, they might even bring in another veteran. Who knows? And I think the defensive backfield is just fine. But man,
playoff
middle.
team. Playoff team.
I would say more likely than not, partly because of the division they're in, And the other thing I would say about linebacker, I think that's the only position on the team that they did not address either through free agency or the draft, and they lost a starter in Caden Ellis. So that's naturally a concern.
I mean, Zach Bond is a natural pass rusher, and they've never utilized him in that position.
Oh, he's going to get a chance.
Okay, so now he's going to get the chance that Ellis got last year. So we'll see if he ultimately playoff team.
And Andrew Dowell, I think they're hopeful he'll.
They are.
step up.
That's right.
With the nickname of Derry Downer, I hate being too optimistic.
Derry Downer.
But I do. I think this is this is an 11-win kind of team. I really did. You know, everyone was all high on him. Jeff Duncan did his poll of are they going to go past the 7.5 wins, which we all thought was a lot. 27 out of 27 New Orleans media members said yes. This year it's going to be half and half. I think they're going to go well over the expected 9 wins. I think they're going to win 11 games. Okay. And I do think they're going to be playing in the playoffs. I think they're going to play maybe in the divisional round, maybe with a break in the conference championship.
You heard it from Jim here first.
So Vegas has gone from 7.5 to 9.
It's 9 right now.
It was 7.5 last year.
No, it was 7.5 last year. It's 9. But it's because of the schedule. There's a
schedule and Derek Carr.
Right. They had Well, they had the 7th toughest schedule going into last year. They have either the easiest or second.
And I'm always leery about schedules because in January we're going to look back and a bunch of teams and say I didn't think they would be that good or bad.
Right. I'm with you.
But Philadelphia had the easiest schedule going into last year. There you go. For them.
All right, guys, let's shift gears to Tulane football. Michael Pratt is back. This team, again, has done really well in recruiting over the last few years. They're coming off maybe the greatest season in the history of Tulane football. Their expectations are high now. Okay, you're not going to, and of course now you're going into a conference where you lost a lot of your big guns. Your thoughts on Tulane football?
Well, I don't see any reason why they can't repeat as conference champions because they still have a very good roster, even though they lost a lot of good players. And the league's not going to be as good as it was because of the schools that they've lost. And, it may be a situation, Tyjae Spears is gone. There's nobody who's going to have the year he had. But they have so many running backs that as a group, I think they can maintain that level of success. And you see that they're extremely deep at wide receiver. And so I think in a lot of cases you may not have individuals stand out as much as last year, but I think that there's enough talent around the whole team that they can be comparable to what they were last year, especially with the conference becoming weaker. And I think we need to take a step back and look at the context of the Willie Fritz era. We're all roughly the same age, and Larry Smith had a great year in '79, and Jim Pittman had one great year, and Tommy Bowden had the undefeated season. But this is what 4 bowl games he's gone to. Went to the Cotton Bowl and beat USC, which I still don't believe. And so I think if you just look at the Willie Fritz tenure, I think we need to take a step back and say this is the best tenure already of our lifetime and maybe in the history of the school, and appreciate it and recognize that this year may very well be a continuation of that.
And appreciate that he stayed, right? Because every one of those coaches you mentioned, once they had success, they were gone.
Well, we thought he was gone, right?
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Georgia Tech, right?
It looked like he was gone.
I mean, come on, the facilities, the money they put into their program, it was a no-brainer that he was going to go.
I mean, why is Georgia Tech a step up anyway? Because it's in the ACC,
right?
To your question, I think expectations need to be tempered just a little bit. It is going to be so hard to repeat what they did last year. And I'm not just talking about because Tyjae Spears is gone. I just think they kind of caught lightning in a bottle. And they caught USC at the right time, too, because USC thought they were going to be in that playoff.
Right.
Everything the balloon kind of got popped for them. But look, I'm not taking anything away from them to beat a quarterback that could be the #1 pick of next year's draft and to go to a major bowl.
And USC, just based on what team they have, right? The recruiting.
Exactly.
I mean, the size of USC. I mean, look, it was an incredible win.
Well, you find out early. I mean, South Alabama is not going to be an easy one. They're about a 7 or 8 point favorite, but you get Ole Miss too. I think Ole Miss is going to be much improved.
Yes.
And so you get to find out early on how good Tulane is. Just I don't know if we can expect Cotton Bowl again.
LSU football. Jaden Daniels comes back. They have a pretty good offensive line that they've been building. Defensively, again, you think they're just the impact of Brian Kelly and his recruiting, they're going to be better. How good can this team be? I mean, some people think that with baseball winning a national championship, women's basketball winning a national championship, that Kelly's next in terms of national championship. Are those expectations too high?
Maybe a little, and Brian Kelly's probably already tired of hearing it because the other two did it in their second year, and it's his second year, which is totally meaningless, but he's going to keep hearing that. It's your turn. But I think they can win the SEC West. They did it last year, and they should be better this year. I think the SEC championship game demonstrated how Georgia has elevated itself above the rest of the conference and the rest of the country. And we'll see. I think they're probably going to be about as good this year. So whether they're ready to beat Georgia if they get to the SEC championship, I'm not sure. If they do, then they'll be in the playoff for sure. But the two things that stand out to me about them, you mentioned the offensive line. Last year, Brian Kelly said early on that was his biggest concern. It remained a concern into the regular season, and now they're returning 5 starters, including 2 tackles who were outstanding as freshmen in the SEC. And the other thing is that the running back position was such a big concern, and now with the guys who have transferred in, they have like 5 SEC caliber running backs, even if they don't get John Emery back, and we're not sure whether he's going to be available or not. So I think the depth at running back, a second year for Jaden Daniels in the offense, and the experience on the offensive line make the offense tremendous, and I think the defense will be good. And if they can just upgrade the special teams a little bit with the coaching change, I think that would be helpful as well.
I think the SEC West is down as a whole. I think LSU is clearly the best team in the SEC West. And I know, you just automatically think, I just don't think Alabama's they have so many quarterback issues. I don't know who's even going to play quarterback for them. I don't think Nick Saban knows who's going to play quarterback for Alabama right now. I think Jaden Daniels is a Heisman candidate. Certainly in the preseason, we'll see. But again, you get to find out how good you are right away, because I think Florida State is a national championship contender this year. I think they're going to be the best team in the ACC. And again, to play them right off the bat in Florida this year, that's going to be an interesting scenario. But I love Jaden Daniels. I think what he brings to this team, and to have a year, we saw it with Joe Burrow did. And I'm not trying to compare. Completely different kind of quarterback. But what Joe Burrow did from junior year transfer to senior year, I think that Jaden Daniels can take that kind of step. Not saying he's going to be Joe Burrow, but I think he can take that kind of step.
Guys, last week we brought this up on this program, and we've talked about it a lot on the radio show, and that is, again, getting another stadium for high school sports in the Metropolitan. Jim, you've been covering high school sports for a long time in this town. Councilman Scott Walker has said there is a move now to retrofit the old Zephyr Field Shrine-on Airline, the gold mine now. $10 million, looking for $10 million from the state. They have $15 million right now in their pot in Jefferson Parish. They want to expand and the stadium. The mock-up shows, again, like a grandstand across from the main grandstand. The USFL is looking for a place to play, possibly USL soccer. We know the rugby team is going to be there, but high school sports need another stadium. Whether it's going to be football, whether it's going to be lacrosse, soccer, whatever, that is necessary, and that stadium needs to be a more multi-purpose stadium. There's a lot of talk about the USFL coming back here to New Orleans. Where would they play? I don't think they're going to be able to play at Yeoman because of the neighborhood. What are your thoughts about this expansion and what this means, not just for Jefferson Parish, for high school sports, and maybe, again, luring a professional soccer team here and having a place for the Breakers to play? You got 2 minutes, and then we'll finish with Jim in about 2 minutes.
Well, it makes sense. Clearly, we don't have enough high school football stadiums in the metropolitan area. We need another one. That's prime real estate that was once a state-of-the-art facility that's not being utilized to much effect other than the rugby. And so it's a waste for it not to be upgraded to where it can fill all of these needs, high school football being significant in that regard. Certainly lacrosse and soccer, all that would be important. I think it's probably the only place the Breakers could play. They're not going to play in the Dome.
No, and they're playing
certainly don't going to play at Ullman. So I think it makes perfect sense. I think the whole thing is going to come down to can enough politicians get enough projects for their district to tack on to this initial idea
Right.
in order to get the votes to get it through the legislature, because they're going to need more money from the state to make it happen. And we saw this happen when the stadium was first built,
Right.
and the arena got tacked on, and the Ilario Center got tacked on, and all this stuff. Everybody's going to want a piece of the pie, and that was a great thing as it turned out.
Yes, it was.
And renovating the Superdome was a part of that other deal. So it can be a great thing for a lot of people, but the politicians are going to have to work it out so that everybody gets enough, so that they get enough votes.
Jimmy, got a minute and a half.
You know, first of all, we talked off the air about how, you know, other states pretty close to us have great stadiums. And Louisiana has, for the talent that is in Louisiana, it's ridiculous that this state doesn't have more stadiums like this. But so Zephyr Field, or whatever you want to call it, the Shriner Airline, the Gold Mine, it needs to be done. This needs to become a great facility. But I'm worried about, you know, Les and I both covered games out there. There aren't a lot of great viewpoints. There's a lot of work that's going to need to be done. I think $15 million, and if they get another 5 or 8, I think they're being a little ambitious. I think that needs to be a lot more work done than $25 million worth of work to make this the kind of facility. And you talk about the breakers. I think 20,000 is the bare minimum. They need a lot of transformations done to the stadium, and I don't know that 25 million is going to cover it. So I hope that it does, and I think that it will turn out to be at least a high school stadium in some part. But all these other things that you're talking about, professional-wise, they're going to need to. They're going to need to get a little bit more money.
Major upgrade, and look, I think it's got to be at least 20 to 30,000 seats, right? I mean, if you're going to put a professional team in, it's got to be at least 30,000 seats, and that is a big upgrade. And as you guys mentioned, the sight lines. Look, I know they have a plan. They have a mock-up. LSED is involved in this. They're moving forward with it, but this is a huge undertaking. But it's a necessary undertaking for not just the parish, but the entire metropolitan area.
Try to call a high school football game from the end zone, and when you're still about 50 yards away from the back line. It's not easy.
Not easy. Jim, Les, thanks so much for joining us tonight on the program. Really appreciate your time. All right, thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's so many ways to catch our program now. There's a QR code on your screen right now. Just tap that with your phone. It'll take you to the WLAE YouTube page or to my website, ericasher.com. You catch me on the radio 4 to 6 weekdays, 106.1 FM Nash Icon. You can listen live at ericasher.com. Also, the iHeartRadio app, the TuneIn Radio app, or our digital platforms. Again, make sure, you also check out our podcast. It's on the Apple, Spotify, Anchor app, all major podcasting platforms. You can also, want to thank our folks here at WLAE, our underwriters, and also the staff here for, producing our program, which includes Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Logan Rafia. Also, Jonathan Whitehead, Danielle Wick, and Alex Chacon, and our director, William Hill. I think I got everybody in there. Thanks to lessees, Jim Derry. I'm Eric Asher. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.
Air conditioning, heating, and refrigeration has been family owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Acadian Custom Shutters is locally owned and operated, specializing in interior and exterior shutters and window coverings, as well as awnings and patio covers. Acadian Custom Shutters offers American products with personal service and workmanship, serving the South Shore, North Shore, and Mississippi Gulf Coast. More information is available at 985-893-3119 or AcadianCustomShutters.com.